Welcome back to Games Revealed. I'm James Brink, and we are one. Today, I want to talk about just 10 hidden features that you have probably already forgotten about. Maybe you didn't know. Maybe you're new to all this. It never hurts to have a refresher course on just how to use the Steam Deck, because there's a lot of features, and just sometimes we forget. They're kind of hidden, but they're not. If you're just into playing games, you're going to forget about some of the other niceties that will help you extend the battery life. Just be able to add non-Steam games to the Steam Deck easier. Just a lot of different things. Then there's a couple of anti-features where they're not really features. They kind of make the deck worse for some people. So we're going to hit that at the very end. It's the bonus content. So make sure to watch the whole thing and to like, subscribe, bash that bell with your crowbar. Now, let's get into it with number one. These aren't really ordered in like importance. I'm just ordering as just to be ordered. Number one, shortcut guide. This guide is what's shown to you in the beginning. You go through the tour, everything when you get that deck, and then you forget about it kind of, because there's a lot of niceties in there, and there's a couple of key ones that will help you with multiple applications. But let's get into the first one that I'm going to highlight a few of these. So we're not going to do every single one. You can see it on screen, but the first one is it's a nicety. If the game freezes on you and you're having kind of an issue getting back into Steam to quit it that way, or if you're having some issues just force quitting it, or just having issues quitting, you can force quit it by holding the Steam button and then holding down the B button. And you have to hold it down for a while, as it does take a few seconds for it to activate, and then it will kill the game. It's essentially Control-Alt-Delete, if you know that from Windows, and going in and forcing the game to quit. There is another way to actually bring up this menu or use these shortcut buttons. You have the Steam button that's on the left side of the deck. On the right side, you have these three dots. Yes, that's the quick access menu, or if you hold it down, you can also use it to access the shortcuts. So, because it's kind of difficult to try to hold down that Steam button and then also hit the D-pads for some of the niceties there. You're going to want to be able to use the other button, the quick access button, to also do the shortcuts. It works the same way. Just hold it down and then hold down one of the other buttons to activate the shortcut. It is nice to know that. That one's kind of a hidden one too. Mouse mode. If you hold down the Steam button and then use the trackpad or the joystick, it will activate mouse mode, and you can see the mouse cursor going over the screen, and you can then maybe get past the stuck portion in an unplayable or unverified game. Some games require a mouse. You can use the touch screen, but what's even easier sometimes is just using the mouse. Now you can use the R2, the L2 buttons. R2 is the left mouse button, and then L2 is the right mouse button, which is the options and stuff like that. Then you can zoom into text that's hard to read and all that. Sometimes you get into the game. If it's not verified, sometimes it's because the text is not just as visible as it should be. So it's hard to either catch up on game details, settings, or just story. And you can actually zoom in with the Steam button or the quick access button, hold it down, and then D-pad right. That will then zoom it into an area, and you can better read. The next one on the shortcut guide is increase brightness. This is a nice one, as if you transition between light and dark areas, different games, sometimes you forget to do it. Now you can access it in the quick access menu. That's an easy way to do it. Or if you want an even quicker way, I'd hold down the quick access menu, and then the up joystick or down joystick on the left side will adjust the brightness up and down. And then for my last little shortcut guide feature, hidden piece, this is the most important one. This is the one that was kind of frustrating, as in when you get into a game that's not fully supported, the escape key usually is like you can either quit out of a menu or maybe bring up the settings or the main menu so you can quit out. Like in Chiaki, when you're doing PlayStation Remote Play, you don't know, like, where's the PlayStation button? Well, you can use this nice little shortcut, which is the quick access menu down or the Steam button down, but it's easier with the quick access menu down, and then the D-pad left. So on that D-pad, you just hit the left one, and it will actuate the escape key so that you can then maybe get out of your game in the PlayStation menu on Chiaki. Now, that's it for the shortcut guide. Let's go into the next one, number 2. Modify your controls for each game or pick a community layout. Now, this one's a nice one because sometimes some games just don't have a layout, and so they'll do the default where it's like a gamepad, or doesn't include mouse support. Let's say it needs to be mapped properly to like a mouse. Valve has done a great job of really creating a lot of default templates that will just treat the way your controller on the deck interfaces with the game. And sometimes if you find that the controls are kind of weird, you can go through those default layouts and just see if one applies. You can also look up online. Sometimes they'll say that. Typically, if the game, especially if it's verified, will already have a layout that's just selected. So you'll see that as the recommended, and usually it's a really good one to go with. But sometimes you want a little bit more niceties. You do things differently. There is a community area too. So if you don't want to go down the guessing game of the default templates, you can then go into the community one and you can read through and see why it's good. Some of them are really good with the Steam controller. Some of them are really good with the Steam Deck. They'll usually have descriptions of stuff depending on how that community member labels it. Those are nice. Honestly, Red Faction Remastered, it was one that I used a community layout and it helped a lot. So I can definitely attest that that community layout area is nice for games that just don't get quite the love that they should in the verifying process. Okay, that is number 2. Number 3 is Proton Versions. This is an easy one, but we forget about it. And sometimes, it's not in the tutorial, I don't think. So if you just go to a game, go to its settings to the right, you can click on that cog, go in and look at the compatibility tab, and you'll see that sometimes, especially if the game's not running, you can click the checkbox, do a custom Proton version, and you can go like experimental is usually a pretty good one, and then you can go down the list. Some games actually work better on older versions of the Proton. That's getting better with each Proton release, but sometimes you just have to go back. If it worked for you, then maybe you need to go back to that previous Proton version. And this is one of the difficult parts of the Steam Deck, but it's going to be one that's going to be ironed out sooner than later. But for unverified, especially for games that just are not verified and you're not sure if it's going to work, or if the Steam client doesn't know which Proton to kind of use, you can go and override that. And this is honestly the first step you should do when diagnosing a game that does not launch, is selecting different Proton versions. There's also a third-party version that you can get that's extended from Proton that a community member is doing, and you can find that in the desktop mode. I have another video on that you can go watch. But yeah, there's additional steps you can do. There's so many different ways you can really try to get those games to work. And some games that have like easy anti-cheat, and some other versions where the game, like Fortnite, just the game company does not want to support it, this isn't going to help you there. But for a lot of games, especially older games, this is where you want to go to, is Proton versioning, just to see which one will work. Okay, number 4 is move a game from storage. And this is a nice one because you'll notice that, hey, whenever I hit the install button, it just automatically starts downloading, and it downloaded to the wrong drive. Well, how do you change that? You can change that by making the default drive whatever drive. So you go into your settings, you go into storages, you can select whichever drive and hit the X button to make that the default install path, and then you can just, whenever you install a game, expect it to go to your SD card. Probably typically is how you want to do it. Unless it's a big game, maybe you want to actually have the SSD be your default, and then you move it. And this is a nice little trick. You can move it from your SSD to your SD card. Now, the SD card works great for games. It's not as good for downloading, let's say, a 50 gig plus game and unpacking it or installing it. Whatever way you want to think about it, the unpacking process takes random write access, meaning it's going to read the compressed game data, and then it's going to unpack it and write it into the drive somewhere else for it to be read. This process is very heavy on certain SD cards that I've learned in the past, and it can be 2 or 3 hours if you're just downloading a 50 gig game onto an SD card. Now, if you do it onto the SSD, then you're going to be looking at drastically less times. I'm talking like 20 minutes, maybe even less. And then when you move it to the SD card, it's even once again, only going to take 10, 20 minutes, if at most, to move that big file over. It is so much less time than just downloading to the SD card on those bigger games. Smaller games, I haven't had issues. And so this is a nice little trick or feature that the deck has that maybe you haven't seen yet. Okay, let's go on to number 5, the quick access menu. This is one that's been talked about so much, and it's one that's, sometimes we just forget. So with that quick access menu, you're going to get like notifications, you're going to get friends area, you're going to get quick settings, you're going to get a help area where you can actually report bugs and get help from Valve. Now, there's 2 other tabs I've left off. The remote play together is one that people forget a lot about. If you buy a game that supports remote play together, you can actually create a virtual session to invite friends or create an invite link and send that to other people that maybe you don't want to be friends with, but you want to play with. And depending on what the game supports and whatnot, a lot of games I've played, like Castle Crashers, supports 4 players. So you can essentially, they don't even have to own the game, by the way. You can essentially give them the URL or invite them. And they could have Steam Link. Let's say they don't have Steam. They just want to install the Steam Link app on their computer. That's all they'd have to do. Hook up a controller. In this case, Castle Crashers, it's nice to have a controller. Maybe some other games could do a keyboard and mouse. And then you can just play. 4 players on Castle Crashers is awesome. And only one person has to buy it. And 3 other people can play it. It's like a fun LAN game party, but you don't have to be in the same room if you don't want, but you could if you wanted, if everyone brought their devices. Same thing with Steam Deck. This is a nice thing with the Steam Deck where if you have a friend that has a Steam Deck, or 3 friends, if you're lucky enough to know 3 people that love the Steam Deck so much, get them into the room together, start up Castle Crashers, and they can join your session, and you can have a good old time. It is really good. It works actually surprisingly very well. Now, the caveat is the game has to require it. Stardew Valley, Castle Crashers, and a lot of other, especially indie games that are multiplayer, do support it typically. And if it doesn't, I'm sure you could request support from the developer. Just depends on if they want to support it. Number 7 is the Performance tab. This is the last tab to really talk about in this quick access menu. And this is one where honestly, you should be going to first when you just set up the deck and everything, in my opinion, and set settings here right off the bat, and then you can adjust it for each game. Now, first up, that first area is going to show you like the frame rate, a couple other pieces that are nice to know when running your games, especially when you're trying to fine tune the settings. That top area is nice for that. But then, and you usually want to activate it to like at least showing your frames per second, which just indicates how good your performance is, how many frames, how many images essentially are being displayed per second. And if that thing drops below 25, 20, you're going to be having a bad experience. So it's nice to be able to activate that and then adjust the next few settings, which is the one I use the most is probably the refresh rate / FPS slider. And I usually change the refresh rate down to 40 or 45, and then I set it to 40. But if you need to, you can always change those around and increment to what you want best. Some games work fine at 30, and you kind of have to do that because you can't get much better performance. But most games usually are great at 40, 45, but if you really want that nice speed, you can always set it back up to 60. Like Doom Eternal, it looks amazing, but it will drain your battery quicker. So this is a nice little trick with that refresh rate, with the FPS stuff, to both get decent enough performance and also battery life. Now, the half rate shading is on top of it another nice one. If you're like playing 8-bit games or just games that aren't as visually demanding or pixel intense, if you throw that thing on, that switch, it will do a pretty good job of reducing your battery usage and increasing your battery life. The TDP will limit how much power gets to the APU. If you reduce that, let's say you're playing something that's really not intensive, maybe you want to set that TDP to 5 watts, you're going to really increase your battery life. Then the last piece on this performance area is the scaling filter, and that is one I usually set to FSR all the way up. I don't usually have issues. Some games can have hiccups if you have this enabled, but if the game doesn't support it, I usually don't run into issues with the FSR slider all the way up. And this is really useful more or less if you're actually reducing the resolution down. It will upscale it and try to fill in the gaps, and it does a decent enough job. Okay, let's move on to desktop mode. You can get to desktop mode by hitting the Steam button, going down to the bottom, hitting power, and then you can see the option of switch to desktop. And once you do that, you're into the powerhouse of features and whatnot and adding stuff to your deck. But we're not going to go over a lot of that. We're going to go over number 8. This is one I'm surprised a lot of people actually don't know about. And this is, if you go into the menu in the bottom left, go and scroll through all the applications. Let's say if you download something or you install something that's not a non-Steam game or something that's just not in Steam, you can right click on it or left trackpad down. You'll get an options menu. You can see in there that you can select add to Steam, and then it will add it to Steam right away. It's easier than actually going into Steam, add non-Steam game. This feature, add to Steam, from the icons and outside of the Steam client, it will actually allow you to add multiple Chromes, multiple edges and whatnot. So if you're trying to create, let's say, YouTube, Spotify, whatever application you're trying to wrap inside of, like, let's say, Chrome, and be able to use it as like a standalone app, which I do have tutorials on, then this is the way to go. You can't add multiple Chromes typically through the add non-Steam game, so you have to go this other route if you want to have a bunch of different services mapped to Chrome and be able to use it in game mode. Now, number 9, and this is just more or less like, people don't realize sometimes that you can use the left trackpad and the right trackpad for the clicking down. I hope you, like, if you use desktop mode on the Steam Deck, you're going to eventually figure it out. But the right click or right tap on the trackpad will be the left click. The left trackpad and then pressing it down will be the right click, which opens up the menu. You can also, this is kind of one of those things that breaks every once in a while. When I've switched to desktop mode, my Steam client won't pop up sometimes. And you'll notice these features, the trackpads, don't click down and actually work. You're going to have to use the R2, L2 for the mouse buttons. And that's more or less like a hidden feature bug, I guess, with because Steam Client adds additional drivers on top of things and allows certain things to just work a little bit better. So make sure that it's running when you switch to desktop mode. Then, number 10, the last one, is the Discover Store. This is a feature, in my opinion, it comes wrapped with the Steam Deck. It is in desktop mode, but the Discover Store in that bottom left area, it should almost always be a shortcut down there. And if you hover over it, you'll read Discover Store. This is where a lot of applications you can find, like Discord. You can also find the Horror Game Launcher, the Lutris Launcher, and also the Bottles systems, which allow you to add Epic Games, GOG, a bunch of the other game launchers, and potentially allow you to play games from those services on your deck. They also bundle in Proton and allowing Proton wrappers to be in there so that it will, add that compatibility later to make sure it can run on Linux. It adds a couple of niceties, but they are difficult to use sometimes. So some games work great, some games don't. Just use at your own risk, in the sense of, like, it won't ruin anything. It's just expect it to not work sometimes. But the Discover Store has a lot of niceties that we've talked about. Chiaki is another one that you can use to remote play into your PlayStation. I have a guide on it, and I'm making a new guide on it to make it even easier. So these are just like 10 hidden features kind of that people forget about, or you don't even know when you get a deck. We're done with those. Let's go on to the bonus round of features that are anti-features and don't really work how people want them to work. First up is the Wi-Fi sometimes just has issues. This will probably get remedied, if not already remedied. I've run into it before, and that's why I'm mentioning it in this list. It could be fixed, but if you're having Wi-Fi issues, this might be a little tip to disable this feature and be able to maybe have better Wi-Fi connectivity. If you find your Wi-Fi disconnecting, disconnecting, and all that, it could be a compatibility issue with your Wi-Fi router. There's a lot of things that it could be, but you could try this first and then revert the changes. If you go into settings, go into the system tab, you'll see a developer mode that you can essentially enable, disable. It should be disabled. Enable that thing, and then you will be able to go back out into the settings, scroll to the bottom, you'll see a developer tab open. You'll then go into there, and then you can disable Wi-Fi management It can decrease your battery life a little bit. It can use a little bit more battery, but if you're having issues with Wi-Fi connecting and all that, that's a major issue. So this could be a step to remedy that until a fix is further implemented in the system. Next up is turn off adaptive brightness. If you go into settings, if you go into screen, you'll see a button just below the brightness scale that you can change, and it's adaptive brightness toggle that thing off, and you won't have it going up and down. It doesn't do a great job, honestly, and a lot of devices don't do a great job, like on your phone and all that. And if this bothers you of it going up and down, not quite selecting the right thing or the right brightness, a lot of people are fine playing at the brightness towards the lowest level they can so that they can extend the battery life of the deck, or how long you can play. If you struggle with the brightness jumping up and down, or if you want to extend your battery life, turn that bad boy off. And that is it for those little features that are almost bugs in some ways. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this video. Is there some hidden features I missed that you would like to mention? Let me know in the comments below. And also, yes, this was a little bit more beginnery of a video, but I want to make sure that everyone kind of just knows how to use their deck. And with that, check out my other goodies down below in the description. You can find cases, you can find just all sorts of different things there. And honestly, you'll have a good time. So check out my other videos for another good time, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out. Later. And then there's two more features that I forgot about, so we're going to make them secret end features to the video. And those two are remote play and family sharing. Remote play will allow you to be able to play your main PC from your Steam Deck, and you have to enable on both the main PC in the Steam settings there, and then also enable it in your Steam Deck. And once you've got that all set up, you should be able to just play any game from wherever you're at in your house on your network. Then the second feature is probably the most underrated feature that's been kind of forgotten about, I think, in a while, and that is the family sharing feature in the settings. You can enable that, and then if someone else logs in on your device and you've authorized them, there is an authorization step that you have to go through. It's not too difficult, but just to make sure that no one else, that you're just authorizing certain people to be able to play on your deck. And so if they're logged in on your deck or on your Steam account, you can actually share your games with them as long as you're not playing a game on your Steam account. So yeah, if you have siblings or spouses, like my spouse can play some of my games while I'm not playing them, and it's awesome because then we can share them and not have to buy multiple copies of a single player game. Great last two features. Honestly, they do get used by me a lot, so didn't want to leave those out. Enjoy and have a good day. Peace out. Later.